I'm AJ Bianco, host of Reflect Ed, a part of the Education Podcast Network. Just like the show you're listening to now, shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of My EdTech Life. Thank you so much for joining us today. Yes, it is a Thursday episode. Do I do these often? Not really, but like I mentioned yesterday when Daphne was on, when things line up, I just have to take advantage of it, and it was just everything lined up great. Where I had Daphne McMenemy on last night, and today I have just a wonderful person, a wonderful leader, somebody who I've actually been on their podcast and we got to chat, and that's the way we've connected, and through several leadership lounges and so on. And now it's an honor and a privilege really to bring on the show one of my favorite podcasters as well, but not only a podcaster, ladies and gentlemen. Charles Williams is definitely a great example of a leader, and he's going to talk a little bit more about his leadership role as we go on through the show. But I'm just excited for today. Charles, how are you doing this evening?
Hey, Fonz, I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. It has been a long week, but it is good to know that I'm going to end it off with you. Today is Veterans Day, so we had the day off, but our staff said, can we work today and take Friday off so we have an extended weekend? So for me, this is like Friday night, and it's my birthday weekend, so I get to celebrate with you. So it's like, yes.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Charles. And happy early birthday, my friend.
Thank you.
I know I'll definitely be messaging you. And it's just, like I said, been a privilege and an honor to connect with you. Like I said, meeting through leadership lounges, thanks to, the Code Breaker lounges, and of course, a lot of mutual connections that we have. And that's been wonderful. But, today, Charles, like I mentioned to you prior to the show, currently I've been diving in deep into leadership, and I've had the privilege to have several leaders on the show recently, that have administrative backgrounds and, are working currently as principals or working in a different capacity in a central office role or even consulting and so on. But I'm just trying to find what that magic, I would say, formula is for being able to see great leaders and seeing the cultures that you have cultivated within your schools, within your work, and obviously, the relationships that you've built within your staff. Like you mentioned, just being so great with your staff, and that they decided to work and, have that extended weekend and building relationships. But before we get into all of that, Charles, for many of our viewers that are watching and this may be the first time that they get introduced to you, tell us a little bit about your current role, your context in education, and if you can add one little interesting thing about yourself that maybe we don't know.
Sure. So, as you mentioned, I am kind of all over, doing a lot of different things. So I am a K-8 principal in Chicago. I've been in education for a little over 15 years now. And I'm reaching about that point where half the time was spent in the classroom and half of that time has been spent as administrator. So it's been exciting just being able to do all of this work. And so I'm always looking to expand my reach and the impact that I'm having. And so I really capitalized on the pandemic. I live in Northwest Indiana, so I have a long commute. On good days, it's an hour and a half. On bad days, it just gets really, really bad. So I took full advantage of having all that time on my hands. And so during that time, I launched a podcast, the Counter Narrative Podcast. So I'm a podcast host. I am the co-host of a show called Inside the Principal's Office, which actually I have an episode airing this Saturday. So we connect with educational leaders from all over the globe, and it's really just a safe space for leaders to come together and to talk and have real honest conversations about the things that are happening in education. And so even though it says principal's office, it's really about educational leaders. And that could be teacher leaders, it could be, leaders, whatever it may be. And then, of course, I founded CW Consulting, through which I speak at conferences all over. I was just at a conference early last week, the Illinois Principal Association conference. I got to present there. We found out we're actually presenting at the superintendents, the Texas. So I'll be down in Texas. So in Austin, yes, in February. So the very end of January, beginning of February, we're presenting at the Texas TASA. So we'll be presenting to all types of superintendents, presenting our new book, which leads me into the last part of this, which I am an author now as well. So my co-host Michael and I, along with Rob, wrote a book. And so, yeah, just a little bit of everything. And then, of course, the one piece I left out of that is just equity champion. And I don't mean it just as like I do the work. I do work for the equity team for the city of Chicago and for Chicago Public Schools. That's really my passion. So, and then, of course, I'm a husband and a father. I don't know where I squeeze it all in, but, we make it work.
Yeah. And that's what I was talking to you earlier today. I was like, with everything you do, and I see you so active on social media, of course, your podcast, part of my walk and learn sessions, in the mornings. And, like I said, just diving deep into leadership and seeing what great leaders are doing. And also to add that to my tool belt, aside from, being an ed tech leader, you just always, I'm one of those that just always wants to continue learning. And, like you said, author now, you've got, conferences. I know you were recently at a conference, maybe about 2 weeks ago as well in that Indiana area, I think, is mutual friend Mike Earnshaw was up there too and posting some stuff. And I saw some pictures there with some other amazing leaders that I definitely do follow on social media. So, and how you squeeze it all in, my friend, I have no clue. But I'm going to let you know something, that what it is that you're doing currently really does matter, because, we definitely need wonderful leaders like yourself sharing your passions with other leaders and bringing those ideas out and about, and, making changes for education. So definitely thank you for the work that you do and the effort that you put in to everything that you do, my friend.
Oh, not a problem. Oh, you know what? I forgot the interesting thing.
Okay. Let's see.
So I once ate 3 different meals in 3 different states in one day.
3 different meals in 3 different states in one day.
Yeah.
What states were those, Charles?
So I was in Vegas. So and when I was in college, I wrote a script. So we had a script writing competition. So another thing, right? But I wrote a script for The Sopranos and won a script writing competition. So they flew me out to Vegas. So my brother and I went. And so we ate breakfast in Vegas. We drove over to the Hoover Dam, ate lunch at the Hoover Dam in Arizona, drove to Santa Monica because why not? Ate dinner at Santa Monica Pier, and then drove back to Vegas. So yeah, 3 meals, 3 states, one day.
That is awesome. That is a great story. I lived in Arizona for a year and got to visit Hoover Dam, and then, drove down the 101 and everything. And it was just gorgeous. It was gorgeous. And, I had a great time there teaching too as well, like different type of school setting than here in Texas. There was 4-day weeks. And so that was really cool. I mean, going to school, working Monday through Thursday. And then sometimes we would have that Monday off following because it was a holiday. So then I would just work Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And then guess what? The weekend is here again. And so it was very interesting, but it was a lot of fun too as well, like I said, but very different than now, Monday through Friday, here we go. And especially in this role now, it's 8 to 5, and but it's all good. And like I said, it's just the passion for education that really drives us to, continue learning and continue doing what we do. All right. Well, Charles, I definitely want to get to know, and one of the things that I love about, being able to have this show and bringing on guests like you is we see the work that you're doing. We see how you're out there in conferences, the things that you share, but I'm always interested in the origin story. Where did this passion for what you do now come from? Was it something that you always wanted to do? or was it something that maybe somebody inspired you to do? Like maybe you had that one great teacher that just, sparked that love for education. So tell us a little bit about your story, Charles. How did this all begin for you?
Yeah, I love the fact that you call it like your origin story because now I feel like I'm like a superhero, right? It's like a long time ago. uh, so yeah, I wish that I had this other story. Like, yeah, I grew up knowing I was going to be like. It is absolutely not that. I had no desire to be in education whatsoever. Even though it was literally my very first job, I worked as a teacher assistant when I was in 8th grade for a summer school program. And my grandmother always told me, like, you're going to be in education, you're going to be amazing at it. And I was like, there's no way, I'm not doing that. I didn't even go to school for it. So I went to school. I graduated with a degree in communication and English, and I had 2 jobs, right? And that's kind of, we talked earlier, that fork in the road. There were 2 opportunities that were presented to me upon graduation. One was to do PR for a local casino. It was a brand new role that they were kind of, filling out, trying to see if they were going to do it. It was a 6-month position. And then the other one was at the school district where I went to school, where I grew up. And I was really debating between the two, but what really was, it was the 6-month position, because 6 months meant that it would end December 1. And if they decided to continue it, then it would. But I was a single dad at the time. And so not having a job in December means no Christmas presents. And I was like, no, I can't do that to my babies. So I said, you know what, I'm going to go with the one that I know is going to be around a little bit longer. And so I jumped on. I joined my old school district, and it started off being mostly PR. And then they said, well, can you teach an English class? Yeah, sure. Why not? I'll give it a shot. Fell in love with it. And before I realized it was like PR and English. And then it was like, at some point I was no longer doing anything that I was hired to do. And I was just teaching these classes. And that was absolutely okay. So I figured, like everything else I wanted to do, I was like, I'm going to be the very best that I can possibly be. Went back to school, transitioned over into teaching, got my first master's in education. And then about a year and a half later, I said, you know what, I want to go back and get my master's in administration. And I think what really drove me as I started realizing it, I was an amazing student. And it's not to brag, but what it was that I fit the mold of what education was, right? You could tell me something and I would retain it. I could read it and I would memorize it. And I was really good at retaining that information, spitting it back out onto a test, right? And I was an ideal student, right? Because I fit the mold. And what I realized growing up, and I should say early in my educational career, was that I had many, many peers, friends, my brother, who they struggled in school. And it wasn't because I was any better than them. It was because they didn't fit the mold. They had different types of intelligences. They needed different approaches to school. And had they been given that, I would have been average. I wouldn't have been this amazing student. It was just so happened that I fit the mold of what education was. And so my goal when I became an educator was like, I'm not going to have that. I'm not going to have that kid who does really, really well simply because they fit and have all these others. I want to figure out, how do I make sure that every single student is successful? I didn't realize there were words for it at the time, right? Now I do that equity work. But that's what really drove me and what still drives me today. And so, now we're 15 plus years and, no end in sight because there's so much more work to be done.
Wow. And that is so interesting. And like I said, this is what I love, and hearing that origin story, like you said, and, and to me, like, and for a lot of us, you are kind of like that superhero, like you said, because of the work that you do, so, we do look up to you, but it's so great to hear, and at least to hear a similar story like mine. Like, I never wanted to be an educator. I never thought once. I always said in high school, I was like, why would anybody want to go to be a teacher? I had several friends that were going to the local college, they were going into education, they wanted to become teachers. And I'm thinking here, scratching my head, why do you want to do that? Like, dealing with parents, grading work, doing this. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to go straight into the College of Business because I want to make some money, so on. So sure enough, went into business. Then, you have those fork in the road moments. And I had to make a decision just due to my dad's health. And so then I said, well, I need a job where I can have more time just to make sure, care for my dad and, help my mom out. And being an only child, it was like, well, you have to make those decisions where I was like, I need to invest more time with my family. And I'm thankful now for the principal who gave me the opportunity. My interview, I kid you not, at that time, I came in. He ended up being a former teacher at the high school that I graduated. And my interview was 10 minutes long. He's like, come in, tomorrow, fill out your paperwork and get started. And I kid you not, I mean, no experience whatsoever, but I did work in business for about 2 years. So it was all about making connections, relationships, and I did marketing. So it's like you got to sell to your customers. And that's the way I treated it, just with those concepts. And I absolutely fell in love with it. From that first moment, I said, I cannot believe I was holding off on this because this is what I was meant to do. And now, 16 years later in education, going from high school down to elementary, and then now as an instructional software specialist, it's been a wonderful ride. And I just want to continue to just ride that wave in education because it's definitely something that I'm passionate about. But I'm glad to hear your story too, as well. As a lot of people may think, oh, this is what they've always wanted to do.
Yeah, no.
No, definitely not the case. So let's talk a little bit there now, as far as now you transitioned from that PR. Now you went into English teacher, and then now the administration bug, going into being a principal. Where did that start from? Did you have maybe that one principal, like, a lot of stories like, oh yeah, they just saw something in me and they just pushed me towards that? Or was this just something that was just within you to say, I want to go ahead and take that next step?
Yes. So, I spent a few years in the classroom, and I don't know why, again, I never view myself as doing anything special or unique, but my students always performed phenomenally well. And again, I think it was really just my approach to make sure that everybody received what they needed, right? It was like, isn't that what everybody's doing? I guess I realized later that they weren't. But I eventually said, I'm enjoying what I'm doing, but I can do this on a much larger level. I want to be able to be in spaces where I can influence other classrooms. And so it's not just happening in my class, but it's happening in other classrooms. And we have that much more of an impact. I've spent my entire career in urban education around students who have been told forever, like, you're never going to amount to anything. These are the things that we believe about you. And I said, enough's enough. Like, I want to see those successes. And so I remember the summer of, was it 2013, I believe it was, my assistant principal, she had gotten sick, and they were like, hey, can you step in for her for a little bit? Actually, it was at the end of that year. So they were like, can you step in for her for a little bit? Sure, why not? So I was an AP and the 8th grade English teacher at the same time, or middle school English teacher. So I was doing a little bit of both. And that summer they said, hey, she's not coming back. We want you to take the role. And I said, absolutely. Right. My goal was to become an administrator by the time I was 30. And that was happening. Right. I don't know why I set that. It was just a nice round number, but it happened. So I became an assistant principal. And so we had a plan. Me and my principal, we had a plan. Like, I'm going to be your right-hand man for 5-6 years. I'm going to learn from you and I'm going to grow. And then when you're ready, I'm going to step into your position. Like, does that sound like a plan? Yeah. Okay, cool. So for a year we worked together, and Ruby James, that was her name. And she taught me so much as I was going through, and it was really wonderful. And that following summer I got to go to China. So I worked with the Confucius Institute. We were setting up sister schools in China, which was amazing. I spent 2 weeks all, halfway across the world. And it was one day I was there, my phone started blowing up, and she resigned. I was like, uh, no, like that wasn't the plan. And I called her, like, what are you doing? Like we had 4 more years. And yeah, so she said, no, I want you to go for the principalship. And I wasn't ready. I didn't want to do it. But the one thing that drove me, and I'll be honest, we had an AP. I won't say her name on the show, uh, but she wanted that job, and she didn't care about the school. She didn't care about kids. She didn't care, and she was willing to undermine and manipulate to get there. And I knew I couldn't live with myself if I sat back and did nothing, and she got the job. And so I said, all right, I'm going to throw my head in the ring too, because if nothing else, I could say I did. I applied. So I remember interviewing for the job. I remember my boss calling me in and he said, I want you to have the job. He was an administrator at a young age. And I remember him telling me that. He said, I see a lot of what I was when I was younger in you. And I want to give you this opportunity. So there I was at like 31 running a high school, middle school. And I was terrified. But that led me into that principalship. And I've never looked back. And so again, it's not this like, special glamorous story of like, oh, I trained and I was, it was the situations were there, the opportunities were present. And I was literally, not literally, but I was forged by fire because that would have hurt. I was forged by fire and trial and error. And I think again, that is really what has turned me into the administrator that I am today. I don't know. I don't know if I would be the same person without those experiences, but yeah, that's kind of how I ended up where I am now.
Wow, that's such a great story. And I want to kind of just continue on with this. Like you said, that trial by fire. I mean, going into this role, what were maybe some things you wish you knew prior to getting into this role? Maybe you don't have to go through a lot, but maybe
Yeah.
the most important aspect of it, what are some things that come to mind right away?
So I think the biggest thing, at least for me, and I'm sure there are leaders out there, and I wanted to say, hey, Mel, I saw you pop it in, so thanks for joining us. So I think the one thing is, especially as a young leader, like you feel like you have to prove yourself. You have to age yourself. You have to do certain things in order to be accepted as a leader. But I think what's more important, instead of trying to impress and prove to other people, I think you need to focus on yourself, understanding what is your why, what is your purpose, and grounding yourself in that and saying, this is who I am. And you're either going to accept me or you're not. And so very early on, that's what I was doing. I was trying to impress. I was trying to prove. I felt this imposter syndrome, right? I mean, I was younger than some of the teachers that I was now tasked with leading, right? For some of them, I wasn't even around as long as they've been in education. So I felt this desire to do those things. And it took multiple years and obviously conversations with peers that it was like, it's not about proving to others. It's about proving to yourself. Who are you? What is your purpose? What is your why for doing this? And centering and grounding yourself in that. And once you do that, everything else will be okay, right? People will believe the things that you're trying to do because they believe in who you are, not all that stuff you're doing. And so I wish I would have known that a little earlier on. Maybe I wouldn't have had so many gray hairs. But yeah, that if I had to pull one lesson, it would be that.
Hey man, don't knock the gray hair.
That's why I shave it. I said otherwise I would pull it out,
Yeah.
right?
No, but and that's so great to hear because oftentimes, I mean, it's very easy. And I know I've had Josh Tovar here, who's just
Mhm.
an amazing, amazing administrator too, as well. And he's here from Texas, and I've had him on the show. And man, he really takes pride in what he does and the work that he puts in, and obviously building those relationships with his staff and celebrating his students and all of that good stuff. And that's something that's very important in the culture that you set for your school. So I kind of want to touch with you on, or go into that with you as well. Currently in your current role, and I know it hasn't been the easiest of times in the transitioning from obviously going from brick and mortar to virtual and now transitioning back into brick and mortar. what are some of the ways that you are kind of, being mindful of your staff and, checking in on them, and seeing how they're doing and building those relationships?
Yeah, so the first thing I'll say is I'm a very visible principal. I don't like to spend time in my office. I like to spend time as much as I can out in the school itself. And so I make a purpose of that. Every morning I do my rounds. I connect with every single staff member, not just teacher, every single staff member. I want them to know I'm there. I'm saying, good morning. How are you? Is there anything you need? Right. Every single morning. And whether it's, I have a teacher who has a Pepsi addiction. I don't drink soda like at all, but I have a case of soda in my office. So when I know that teacher's struggling, I go and I grab one, and as I'm walking around, I'm like, here you go. Right? It makes a world of a difference. So it's about building those relationships. We talk about it all the time with our students. You have to build that rapport with your students, and it's the same way as a leader, building that rapport with your staff. Um, and so, whether it's connecting in person, I got a great idea from a friend of mine, Tara Desiderio out of Pennsylvania. She has a form that she has her staff fill out. And so it's like a Monday morning check-in. And so we started off as a Monday morning. Now it's just a daily check-in. So if you want to drop in that little form and say, hey, I'm doing great today, amazing. Like, I want to celebrate you. I need somebody to come listen to me, right? A member of my team will come and listen if it's not me. So my staff knows at all times that they're being supported in every single capacity. And sometimes even during our meetings, we just suspend it. And I'm a huge fan of circles. And I don't know if you've ever had, circles or people out there watching. Circles are powerful tools. And so I remember recently, maybe 2-3 weeks ago, we said, look, we're not having our meeting. We're just going to hold circle. Like, we're just going to be community. And we sat and we cried together and we laughed together. We were just so stressed. And then afterwards, I think that it united us once again. So that was on a Wednesday. That Thursday, completely different vibe in the building. So I think it's important, right? It's not about the programs. It's not about, all of these little things. It's just, how can I connect with you and let you know that you are a member of this school, that you're a member of the family, that we just have that connection. And what's a beautiful thing is now they're doing it to me. They come into my office and they're like, did you take a break today? Right? Because I don't know what a lunch break is. I have no clue. I just keep working. And they're like, did you take a break? Like, let me take over. My secretary was out. I was running the main office. They let me run the office. You go take a break. Right. And so it's a communal thing. And it doesn't happen overnight. There's no secrets or magic to it. It just takes time to build it. And again, I know relationships is very cliche, but that's really what it is. It's building those relationships just as I want them to do with their students. I have to do it with my staff.
Wow, that's great. And like you said, it is very important, the communication. And I think too, just for them to be able to see that human side, that
Mhm.
aspect. And like you said, you being there, taking part and just saying, you know what, I know we have a department meeting or we have this kind of meeting. Let's set that aside because you're looking for, or you're looking at them and seeing how they're doing and realizing that they just may need to vent, can communicate, and all of you were just there and being vulnerable.
Mhm.
And I think that that's something that's wonderful that oftentimes even as principals or even just as us and the day to day, sometimes for a lot of people it's hard to say like, hey, they're vulnerable, like I don't know, maybe the answer to this, and they put themselves out there and so on. I'm one of those that I'm just like, yeah, I wear my emotion, like I can't hide that, and sometimes I feel vulnerable, and it's okay. I've learned how to deal with it. But I think for a lot of people, seeing a leader be part of them and being able to see that human side really, you make that connection and you open up those lines of communication. You're building those relationships, and that's something that's great, and that's definitely very important. And what I like to add to that is to ask you, as a principal, we know for sure that from the top there are many directives that come, and
Mhm.
especially now starting the school year, directives that come, you've got state assessments, you've got data point assessments, you've got everything because everybody's trying to measure everything under the sun. How do you as a leader manage to say, okay, I know they're asking me to now put some more stuff maybe on the plates of my teachers. I know what they can or can't handle. How do you navigate that and find that balance to where you can still keep your staff encouraged, hyped up, keep that vibe, keep that culture going, along with still being or having to kind of bring those directives in? What are some of the ways that you do that?
So, for me anyway, my staff has a ton of autonomy, like a lot. Um, I realize I'm not on the front line. I'm not in the classroom every day teaching to a group of students all day long. And so for me to sit back and say, this is the best way to do that, like I can't do that. I've been out of the classroom for almost 9 years now. And I realize that and I have to accept that. And so what we do with our staff is we say there's a lot of autonomy to say you can do these things, but here are non-negotiables. These are things that have to be done. And so a lot of times I meet with them and say, hey, for example, if there's a directive coming down, this is something we have to do, right? The state or the district or our central office, whatever it may be, is saying this is something that has to be done. How should we make this happen? How would you like for this thing to happen? Like, it's not a matter of do you want it to happen or should we do this thing? It's no, this has to happen. But how? How do you want to make this thing happen? And a lot of times, right, I think in the beginning, teachers are like, this is a trick. You're setting us up. It's like, no, absolutely not. Like, I want to know how you want to get this thing done because what makes more sense to you? Like, for example, right now, we received a pretty large grant and they said you have to partner with an organization and focus on your CIWP, our Continuous Improvement Working Plan. So MTSS was a part of that. And so, I told our staff, we consultants came in and said, oh, well, if you need MTSS, you need this, and this. I said, okay. So I asked my staff, I said, these are the things they're saying that we need. How can we put this into what we're already doing? What makes sense to you? I don't want to overwhelm you. And so they were, well, can we do this for that piece? Can we do this? Can we utilize this? Can we? And we built it together and we made it make sense to what it is that we were doing. And I could have sat back and said, nope, we're doing all of these things and we're just adding onto that plate. But I knew if I did that, there wouldn't be buy-in. Teachers are going to get burnt out. It wasn't going to get done to be, at the end of the day, it wouldn't be done anyway. So what's the point? So that's my approach. We talk about you have a ton of autonomy, but these are my non-negotiables. How do you want to make these things happen? And I let them do it because at the end of the day, if I give them that power, then it's going to get done. And that's what I need. So that's at least my approach. And I know it doesn't work for everybody, but it has worked wonders in our building. And again, we've cultivated teacher leaders. We've built this space of empowerment and care and community because they really feel as if, and it's not even feel, they know that they have a voice in the things that happen within our school. Plus, it makes my life a lot easier.
Yeah, and I agree. I think what it comes down to, Charles, and what I'm hearing you, in the way that you've been able to keep that balance is relationships have been the key. I mean, they trust you enough, but the fact that you're turning around and you are trusting them, like you said, you willingly admit it. You're 9 years removed. You're not in the front lines. The teachers are the experts. They know what the students need. You're listening to them. And then the fact that you give them choice or voice and a choice, I think oftentimes that's what just a lot of teachers, they want to feel heard. They want to feel validated. They have put in the work. And just for you to come in and say, look, this needs to be done, but how can we do it? How can we put this together? And I think that is wonderful, but it all stems from the relationships that you've built with them, that trust. And I think that I think that's the root for a lot of issues. I think, maybe a lot of issues that may be happening currently is, where are those relationships? And I'm seeing the return on investment. And I always use that phrase a lot. It's the more time you invest into building these relationships right from the get-go, and even first year teachers and mentoring others, that will pay off in the long run, where slowly people will start seeing that vision that you as a leader have, but you're doing it together. It's
Mhm.
not like this is the way it's going to go and that's it. And I love that. That is wonderful. So thank you for sharing that. And again, for anybody listening and you want, some really great advice. I mean, you just heard at least the way that it's worked for Charles, but he even said it may not work for you, but I know that you'll definitely find some great knowledge nuggets in what he just shared right now, because I know I did. And so it's great. All right. Well, Charles, let's go ahead and just switch the conversation over a little bit too now, because I definitely want you to share, like you said, you're first time author now.
Yeah.
So, aside from everything that you're doing within the school, what sparked that inspiration, to say, hey, let's go ahead and write a book and put this together? So tell me the little story about that too as well.
Yeah, so I'll be honest, and so Brian, if you're watching this, I apologize still. So Brian and Daphne approached me. So we had a conversation at the end of last year, and I pitched an idea for a book that I had been kind of formulating in my mind for a while, and they were like, "This is awesome. Let's get this thing drafted." So while I was drafting that, there's a guy from our show. He was a guest on our show, and he said, "I got this great idea for a book, and I want to write it with you and your co-host Mike." And so we're like, "Okay, why? Why would I say okay? I don't know." Like I was just like, "Sure." It's not like I'm already writing another one. Um, but the three of us, we sat down, and it was a really, to be honest, it was really easy for us to draft it. We drafted the entire book in less than 6 months. Because what it is, it's 40 weeks, so it's right here. But what it is, it's 40 weeks of lessons followed by reflections. And so I think what made this thing really easy to write, well, one is there's three of us, that helps. But the other part was we were just talking about our own experiences. These were stories that we've cultivated. Mac has been a principal for like 20 something years. Rob has been in administration for a number of years. I'm the baby in that group. And we just said, here's our stories. These are the lessons we've learned. So we broke them down into 40 weeks. So a leader could read one a week and just had reflection pieces. And so every week ends with an opportunity to not only say, okay, I've read this, but how can I apply this to the work that I'm doing? And so that's, it just made sense. I think we were, it was in the summer. Well, it was wrapping up last year. We knew we wanted it to come out in the summer, the beginning of the year. We were in this incredible time of transition. And so we really wanted just something that leaders could ground themselves in as they entered into a year of unknown, of chaos. Just to say, okay, how am I going to ground myself each and every single week? And that's what led to this. And so I'm still working on the other one. So Brian, I promise it's coming. Um, but yeah, that's what led to this. And it's been really nice. In fact, this is what we're going to be presenting at the conference, the Texas Administrative Conference, at the end of January, beginning of February. And you could find it all over on Amazon, or you could connect with me if you want an autographed. Yours, I thought, would be that. I was hoping you would have it in time for this episode, but it should be arriving, I'm guessing, tomorrow, maybe. The holiday cut it off or something.
No, and definitely I'm excited. Like I said, prior to the show, it's like lately, I'm changing some of my routines and my learning and things of that sort. Right now, I've been really going through this phase of leadership and looking at those leaders that are out there. They're putting themselves out there on social media, and then really seeing that they're not only, talking the talk, but they're walking the walk and so on. And, that really means a lot. And for me, I'm just excited to be able to dive in. And like I mentioned to you, it's like I never aspired or thought about maybe even thinking about going into administration. But then I'm like, you know what? Why not? Like it's something that excites me, and of course, being able to see and learn from people such as yourselves and mentors that I've had along the way. I know it won't be something that's easy, but if that's something that I foresee, why not equip myself now, and have as many tools available that, although, as you know, education, you just don't know what may be coming, but to have the ability to improvise, adapt, and overcome, and fall back on some of these tools, and things like yourself, the book, resources like your podcast and other fine educators that are out there and administrators, it's something that's great. And being able to connect with you all, be like, hey, Charles, I need some help. What would you do if this and this and that? And I think that's the great part about how things are now, the
Mm-hmm.
ability to connect with other leaders. And it's okay to pick up the phone and say, hey, you know what, Charles, this is what's happening. What would be your advice? And then, just spitball ideas, or maybe hear out your experience, and, try and better a situation and things of that sort. So I don't know. For me, it's just, it seems like the problem solving is too easy to not be able to do by simply reaching out to somebody else. But I don't know. Oftentimes, as leaders, we can just feel a little just like, ugh, I don't want to. I don't want people to think that I'm not doing well or something like that. It's just part of the job. Sometimes is you just have to feel vulnerable. You don't know everything,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
but yeah, it's important to continue to grow. Well, I'm excited definitely about getting into that book, and I can't wait to get it into my hands. So let's talk a little bit more. Like you said, tell me a little bit about your experience that you just had at this past principals conference. I know I saw you being
Yeah.
active, you were presenting. So tell us a little bit about your presentation there, and was there a theme that you picked up from there, something that you saw, like, oh, everybody's talking about this specific piece or this specific, area that may be lacking. What are your thoughts and insights?
Yeah, so it was the Illinois Principal Association Conference, or IPA. So when I was telling people I was like at the IPA, they're like for beer? It's like, no, like that would not. I'm not a big fan of IPAs to begin with, but this IPA I am. And you're right. I got to connect with some amazing leaders. So Mike Earnshaw, he's a principal in Lansing, good friend of mine and a podcast host, Punk Rock Classroom. So check him out. Jeff Prickett, who is another amazing leader, and he won high school principal of the year. So congrats again. And the three of us, we all just released books like at the same time, which was like, so we were like doing book swaps there, and we had a blast. And then, of course, I got to connect with some other individuals, Scott and Alex, met some other amazing principals out there. And so I think that was one of the best things was just, we often talk about, like they say, that or leadership or the principalship is lonely. And it can be. But my phrase is that leadership is only lonely if you're doing it wrong, right? Because it shouldn't be lonely. As you just mentioned, like we have each other to connect with. And so, yeah, maybe when I'm in my building, it's a little lonely because there's certain things I can't talk about with the people who are around me. But I have a lot of people that I can communicate with, that I could rely on, that I could connect with at any given time. So by no means should leadership ever be lonely. And I think, one of the biggest themes that stemmed at this conference, and I heard over and over and over again, was just kind of rejuvenating us. Much like how the purpose of this book, we knew that this year was going to be rough, but I don't think we ever had any idea of exactly how rough it was going to be. And so the message that we kept hearing was like, no, you're making an impact. You are doing great things. Believe in the work that you're doing. And so it was really just uplifting and rejuvenating us, which was very needed. I remember coming back to school. I was gone that Friday for family weekend for my daughter down at Purdue. I was gone Monday and Tuesday because I was at the conference. So I was out of the building for 3 days. And I came back Wednesday, and they were just like, you look good. And I said, I feel like rejuvenated just from connecting and receiving from, my fellow educators. And while I was there, I got to tell my story. One of my presentations that I've been doing a lot and has really been catching a lot of traction is the color with color blindness. So I talk about my experiences growing up as a biracial individual, but I was raised by my white grandparents, and so I didn't really get to know the other side of me and the impacts that had. And while good and well intentioned, to say, hey, we're going to strip you of certain identities to keep you safe, the impacts that it had. And so I share, I got to share that story again, and it's always nice to be able to, again, just to be able to tell your story, because when people come up to you afterwards and say thank you, right? There was a woman I remember sitting in the front row, and she had just adopted a young person, and she said, we're not of the same culture, we're not of the same race, and I'm terrified. I don't want to mess up. I don't want to make mistakes. And so I said, well, I don't know what to tell you, but I'll share with you my story, and then you can make some decisions. And so at the end, she just said, thank you. Like, you answered so many of my questions. I have this idea of how I should move forward. And that's not why I went, right? That's not why I went there, but that was the impact that I got to have on another fellow educator, another leader. And so, yeah, it was so much fun, just connecting, but it was also empowering and powerful. So it was an amazing experience. And so I would recommend connecting with some of those leaders that I mentioned earlier. They're wonderful people, and they're all from Illinois. So they're all from up here. So
Yeah, you know what? And that's I was just going to say that, some of the principals like yourself and Mike Earnshaw, who I follow also as well. I'm like, man, Illinois is doing some pretty good stuff, and build. There's something in the water over there. I need to go take a sip of that leadership water over there.
Yeah, come on up. Just don't drink out of like the Mississippi.
No. All right, Charles. Well, as we're kind of winding down, kind of like the last 15 minutes,
Sure.
I kind of want to ask just a couple of, just maybe one or two more serious questions, and then we'll have a little fun there to end. But right now, currently, what are some things that you're seeing in education through your lens that might be counterproductive right now? Is there anything that comes to mind?
So I think the very first thing that comes to mind is this. And I don't understand why, because we kept talking about it and saying we can't do it. And yet it feels like we are. There's this push to go back to normal. And it was like, it didn't work. Like, we kept pushing against that thing. We broke the mold. We had an opportunity to start over. So why are we trying to implement? And I get it, because it's what we know. It's what's comfortable. We have systems in place that operate on that. And if we get rid of it, that means we have to redo everything. But we do. And so I think that's the thing that scares me the most, and that's going to be counterproductive, is that we're going to fall back into old patterns when we know that they weren't working to begin with. We had these drastic shifts during the pandemic because it's what we needed to do. And then it's like, well, it worked, right? Why are we going to go back to this thing? And to use an example, prior to, I remember trying to set our schools up for e-learning days. And my district was like, no, e-learning days, what's that? We don't do that. A year later, we had e-learning days, not by choice, because we absolutely had to. And so now the question is, well, we have this opportunity to deliver instruction remotely. I understand we are not perfected it. There's still kinks and things like that. But we have this tool that is now available to us. And we get so much pushback to say, no, we have to be in person. We have to be in person for everything. And while I absolutely agree that face-to-face is far superior, there's a lot more things that can be done, there's times when we need to utilize that other method. But there is more and more pushback against any type of remote learning. And that scares me, because we realize this is a legitimate tool. We can do things with this, but because people are afraid of it, because they're not comfortable with it, because now we're back to normal. Well, we don't need that thing anymore, right? It was a fad. It was like, no, like this is where we were marching towards. We took a giant leap because of the pandemic, but we should still be moving in that direction. And so that really worries me. And more so, not just the actions, it's the reasons. It's the why behind all of it. I joke a lot of times that if we were to make the shifts and the changes, and it's not a joke, I'm serious. If we made these shifts, there's a lot of people that are afraid of those shifts and what it means for them, right? We disrupt the status quos. We say, hey, more people have access and opportunities, right? And people are afraid of that. And so the jokingly part is I was like, these massive publishing companies, these curriculum companies who have made their fortunes off of, here's this texted curriculum, right? This boxed curriculum, run with that thing. It's like, if we could teach them how to do personalized learning, if we could teach them how to do, equity work, if we could teach them how to do remote learning and all of these things, and where they could profit off of it, we'd have no issue, right? Because all of a sudden then it's like, oh yeah, sure, do these things. But what we're talking about is systemic change, and it absolutely disrupts things. And that's what bothers me the most. It's not what comes out of it. It's why those things are happening. And that's what we have to change, because if that changes, all the outcomes change. But we can never change the outcomes if we don't change the why. And that's the part that scares me the most.
Wow, that's very powerful. Thank you so much for sharing that. And you're absolutely right. I mean, I can't agree with you more in what you're saying. And to me, at least from my standpoint in seeing the technology, students are one-to-one. Some of the things that we're seeing is teachers are saying, no, don't take your device home. It stays here, because they're scared that they're not going to bring it back, or it's going to break, or they're not going to bring it back charged. And sometimes I feel that they don't give enough credit to even the young kids, pre-K, kinder. Now they have access. To me, it's like, a student to be able to have access. I didn't have a computer, and I'm dating myself here big time. I didn't have a computer pretty much ever until after I graduated college. I was always using computer labs and so on, because I never thought like, whatever. But now, I mean, it's part of my life. Now, a Chromebook is to me, I'm thinking this is a consumable. Like, we have consumable textbooks that we give our students that they write on. Well, to me, a Chromebook is a consumable now. It's the cost of operating, where the students can access their platforms, but yet teachers are saying, no, it's going to stay here because I don't want you to take it home, because what if you forget it? Or what if you don't charge it? What if you don't do this? It's like you're taking away kind of that independent learning that the students can be doing at home. They could be watching a YouTube video. Yeah, they can, but they're learning something that they may be passionate about. They may be learning maybe what they learned, but maybe they're seeing it in a different, way, either through video or different kind of instruction and so on. But to me, it's so important that the students are able to have that access and be able to have that independent time where they can just go into a platform, learn. They can go through, certain programs that the school offers, or maybe even programs off on their own that, say, hey, Khan Academy, let me go through some videos. And, they just continue working with that independent practice. But like you said, I think a lot of energy has been spent. And I feel that teachers have worn themselves out because they keep fighting to go back to the way things were, instead of seeing, okay, this is where I'm at now. Let's find those little micro victories. What have I learned? How have I improved? And how have the students improved as far as the tech? And then we just continue to move forward and, and not fight to get back to the way things were, because it's not going to be the same. So those are the things that I see just through my lens there.
No, I like that analogy. Like we got swept, right? It was like we were going down the river, we hit rapids, and we got swept away. And now it's like, oh, wait, I'm going to try to swim back upstream so I can get back to a point. And it's like, no, we were heading this way anyway. Like, we're here, so let's just go along with it. And you're absolutely right. I think so many times it's not the students that are, it's us. We are afraid, right? I mean, think about what education used to be. Like, teachers were the harborers of information. in order for you to know certain things, you had to pass through me. And that is no longer the case. Like we all have our devices, right? And it's like, I don't need you for anything. I'm going to ask Google or Siri. I was waiting for it to kick in. You know, I could just ask and I'm going to get that information, right? We are no longer harborers of information. Instead, what we're facilitators of creation. Like, what do you do with that information? How can I make, right? And I think that terrifies teachers that there's a shift in that power dynamic to say, you know, these kids have way more talent and way more information than we will ever have. I have a godson who's 2 years old who will take his mom's phone, open up Netflix, flip through, and I'm like, how do you know how to do that? And we're terrified of them taking Chromebooks home because I don't know what you like.
Yeah. And
step back and let them do, and you're going to be amazed at what students are able to do. And that's just, I don't know, that's just me. And again, like I mentioned earlier, that autonomy the same way. And I'll be honest, one of the reasons I do that with my teachers is because I always believe in modeling, right? I always want you to do the same things that I'm doing for you. I need you to do that for your students, right? I can't just sit here and say, oh, I'll do these things. Like, I need to model that. And so I'm hoping they do the same thing for their kids.
Yeah, excellent. Well, Charles, let's finish up here as we finish up our episode with two favorite questions that I love to ask all my guests here. Question number one is, if you can have a billboard with anything on it, what would it be and why?
A billboard with anything on it. You know, the very first thing, because I was trying to come up with something else, but I'm just going to go with the very first thing. I was thinking of like one of those billboards with just like a little dot or something on it, right? Just like I've just drawn your attention to it. No real reason. Like, I think there's enough. Like, I don't know about you. So I've been driving a lot. My daughter's down at Purdue. So I've been doing a lot of trips back and forth lately, plus my drives through, you know, from here to work. And there's a lot of billboards that are just like screaming at you, like, buy this, look at this, buy that. And it's just like, could you imagine a billboard? It has that little dot, so it draws your attention, but it's just like, no, just, hey, how's it? Maybe that's what we'll say in the middle. Hey, just saying, hey, not trying to sell you anything, not trying to bother you, just, hey.
Perfect. That's great. That's great. Sometimes, and you're absolutely right. I know on my drive and my commute to work, I see the billboards, and now they're digital, and you know, you've got, you know, signage that's just like you said, really screaming at you. And sometimes the billboards that I look forward to are the ones that are actually advertising for you to put something on that billboard, and they'll just simply say like, hey, got your attention.
Yeah,
that's it.
Made you look.
That's it. Made you look. That's it. And I get a crack out of those every single time because they're just so simple and very effective. So that's a great answer. All right. And Charles, I know that this question is going to be a little weird because I know I have been on your podcast. So I have been on the receiving end of questions. But if tonight, right now at this second, you and I were to switch roles, what would be one question you'd like to ask me?
I think if I was to ask myself through your, right? That's what I'm doing. I'm asking myself, or I'm asking you in my role.
Yeah, no, we're switching roles here. So in other words, you're the podcast host.
All right. Oh yeah. So what I get to do.
Yeah, what you get to do. And then so now you get to ask me a question today too.
Fun. So I know that you've talked about the idea about going into administration. And so really my question for you is, I know you said I'm thinking about it. You know, I'm doing all of these things about it. So it's a very simple question. Why not?
Very simple. I think right now and again, this isn't really too much of an excuse, but since right now I'm doing my doctoral studies, I'm like, man, it would just be too much to add some more coursework on top of that. So that's the only thing. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, there is a program that is out there that I did find that I was like, hey man, this is very manageable I only need about 6 more hours or 6 more classes for my doctoral studies before I get into dissertation. And then I looked at the program, I was like, this is something that's very doable. So honestly, I think, Charles, it's really, I'm just kind of finding somewhat of an excuse to maybe just say no, maybe not. But the more that I think about it, it's like, why not? And to be honest with you, I actually did sign up for an information session that'll be coming up this January for that program. So I think that it is something that will come to fruition. But I think it's like I said, it's just my passion for education is really driving me in that direction. And my passion for continually learning. And more than anything, it's just making a difference, making an impact in my learning community, making an impact on students, making an impact on teachers, and just maybe sometimes just changing the way things are always done, because we've always done it this way.
Yeah.
Why not change things? Let's shake things up a bit. Let's shake things up in a way where people get excited again, and remember their whys and are excited because their why is always, at the forefront of their day, and say, hey, I get to go to work and I get to teach because this is what I'm passionate about. Maybe just be that leader that just lights that fire, much like you do with the relationships that you've built. And it's just something that excites me. As you can tell, I got real excited just talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so why not? And
Why not?
I don't think that question it'll be answered soon. It won't even be a question anymore. Like I said, I think it's something that'll definitely come to fruition, and and that this next stage, coming up maybe next year. And why not? I'm excited and looking forward to it. And especially because, like we talked about earlier, to me, and I'm not taking away anything from the principal's chair, because that is a very important chair. But for myself, the way I see things in my mind is, if I don't have the answer to something, I'm going to go straight to the source and I'm going to ask. And that's the way that I've been able to connect with so many wonderful educators and leaders like yourself, that at least I know that going into this, I would have read books. I have made connections with you and other wonderful educators and leaders, that if I do find myself in a situation where, hey, you know what, I'm not sure how to manage this or how to approach this, I can go ahead and pick up my phone and say, hey, Charles, hey, you got a sec? Like, I want to run some things by you. What would you do? Am I on the right track? Hey, Mike, how are you doing? Do you have a second? And to me, I hope I'm not downplaying the role, man, but to me, it just seems like I can pick up and find answers easily and find solutions to those problems because I care enough about it, rather than just kind of sit and just not do anything and just kind of let everything just pass you by. And then all of a sudden, people, relationships start breaking, or, school started to fall apart, or things of that sort. I don't know. Those are just my thoughts. I kind of ramble there a bit, but
No. I was gonna say, so I don't want to speak for everybody else, but I know you have a resource here, right? And then I think one of the best things about having these connections is knowing that there are people who have gone ahead of you and who have made mistakes and who can say, hey, you know what? Here's some advice, here's some ideas. Because when you're navigating that pathway, as I did many, for a long time early in my career, I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have a role model. I was just kind of figuring things out on my own. And had I had the resources that I have now, these connections that I have now, I think that would have been vastly different. And so you're right. It's not about downplaying. I think that the transition and moving through will be much different, will be much easier, because you have people that you could connect with and rely on and say, how can I avoid some of the same pitfalls? How can I avoid some of the same mistakes? I mean, by no way means will it be easy, but it'll be easier because you have a network of people that you could rely on. So absolutely feel free. I will make sure that you have my number, and feel free to use it at any given time.
I love it. See, and that's the power of connections. And Charles, honestly, it's just been a wonderful chat, just honest, genuine. I really appreciate your openness. I appreciate you opening up to, your world, to our audience, those that were watching live, those that are going to be listening to the show later on or rewatching the episode. thank you so much. And, like I said in the very beginning, and I stated it, I really do mean it sincerely. Thank you so much for what you do, not only for your staff, for yourself, for your family, and for people like myself that, like I said, I never wanted to be in education. 16 years later, I'm still here in education. And now I said, you know what? Why not continue my passion for education? Because it's people like you that I see that are inspiring. So thank you, my good friend. I really appreciate you.
You're very welcome, and thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to connect and to share. And I hope to that you do some amazing. Not hope. I know you're going to do some amazing things, Fawn. So thank you.
Thank you. And for all of you audience members, thank you so much again for joining us. If you joined us live, or if you're going to catch this episode, on the replay or listen to it at a later time, thank you so much for making my EdTech life what it is today. And as always, I always ask for your feedback. Log on to our website, go on to myedtech.life, give us a review or drop us a message. Send us a message directly. Let us know what can we do better. How can we improve? Because as you know, this is my passion to bring educators and creators together one show at a time. And again, thank you so much for all of your support. And as always, my friends, until next time, don't forget, stay techie. We'll check you later.